In 1974, one of the largest tornado outbreaks in our nation's history did not spare some communities in northwest Alabama.
In part one of a three-part series, CBS 42 meteorologist Mark Prater talks with some of the very few people to ever survive an F5 tornado.
9 p.m., April 3rd, 1974. A violent F5 tornado nearly wiped Guin, Alabama off of the map, taking 23 souls in seconds. On April 3rd, 1974, earlier in the day, a sunny, muggy day, 7-year-old Keith Miller was homesick from school, and weather was the furthest from his mind. But elderly neighbors, maybe seasoned with severe storms, headed to a tornado shelter buried in the earth at 4 p.m.
They came and sat in the storm cellar while it was still kind of like this out.
That evening, the Millers and many others in Guin were winding down for the night. 8:58, a deep, constant rumble began to shake the ground and their home.
Mom just come busting through my room. I still have the image of her face, just the terror in her eyes etched in my mind. And I remember her saying, we've got to go to the storm cellar, we've got to go to the storm cellar. You know, I used to play on this thing as a kid before the storm.
From a playground to a lifeline, these concrete slabs meant life or death, if they could make it.
House, and my dad and sister were in front of us. At the time, I didn't realize how close it was.
We got out in the carport, and there was branches and limbs blowing past Keith and I, and the wind was, I couldn't go against the wind, and I just stopped. I thought, it's like my mind just froze in time.
It took my dad, Mr. Haney, and Mr. Baker, the three of them, to actually close the door and latch it.
Once inside,
imagine having a bag of these leaves in a leaf blower and it just blowing in this hole. That's a storm came through. You could feel the pressure drop. Your ears just start popping. And it was a sound. It's like everyone describes being next to a 747 as it takes off. And I remember my mom putting her hands over my ears like that and being just being shaken real violently.
you're underground and you're being shaken.
Yes.
I no sooner sat down than I heard this noise like pulling up a huge tree, it was going over the storm cellar, and it was like cracking. It was just like the most terrifying thing I had ever heard.
That sound was the shelter being sucked from the ground by the tornado. Climbing out, the horror they would see, hear, and feel was unimaginable. Finding neighbors who didn't make it in time.
Her name was Janet Brown, and she's actually the age of my oldest daughter now, which really kind of hits home. And she was, her whole family, unfortunately, did not make it to the storm cellar in time.
Mark Prater, CBS 42.
40 years later and still like yesterday. Coming up tonight on CBS 42 News at 6, Mark continues his story of that devastating night in Guin in 1974.